This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we discussed about the important concept to call input-output stream related example we identified here. Today, we'll discuss about the another important concept to call generics here. So, generics is one of the important concept because in the day-to-day development also, we are going to use more and more regarding this particular generic concept. Now, we'll understand here how this particular generic is going to be implemented internally. What are the main advantage we are going to get here? So mainly this generics concept is introduced from the version called 1.5. Now if you observe, most of the versions are introduced from the 1.5 onwards here. Okay, so entire the Java language, the first major release called 1.5 here. Now here inside this, what are the main concept is modified here. Basically, generics is going to change the Java in the two important ways. What are the two important ways? First, it is added new syntactical element here. Basically, so it is added one new syntax here. Now, earlier, this particular up to 1.4, we don't have a syntax here. But from the 1.5 onwards, we are having new syntax here. Now, this is the first addition. And the second one, it is change the number of core APIs here. The number of API calls is modified here. Why it is modified the number of API calls? Because here, based on this particular new syntax, whatever is added with the existing code, it is not work properly. Because of this, most of the core library are changed here. Like core library is nothing but the classes and methods are changed here. Okay, so these are the main important section we need to understand here. Now, if you observe entire this particular generic concept here, now we are going to create a classes, interfaces, and a method. So they are going to work with a different kind of data type here. So for example, I'm having a method. What is the method? So first, this is the test method we are having, and this test method I want to return one case as a double. Okay, so this test method I want to return one case as a double, and another case this method it should be written as a boolean here. Okay, same test method here I'm trying to write here, but if you observe one case, this method is trying to return as a boolean, but another case, this is the same method, now it is trying to return as a double. This is what we need to understand here. Okay, this is what we need to understand. Now, using the generic concept, this particular behavior we can implement here. But without the generic concept, there is no scope to come up with these are the two different return types here. So same way we can come up with a class. For the class level, for example, so this is the class I created. Okay, so something like a class. Now here, generics concept. Now here I'm trying to add generic concept. Under this particular generic concept, this particular class, first time I want to pass as a person object. So second time, I want to come up with a different object, like a member related object. Okay, so if you observe carefully, here I'm having person object. Okay, and another one is member object. Now, what we need to understand here, so if you observe carefully, same class, this is the same class. Now, it is going to allow two different type of classes, like two different type of object we are going to create. The first one is person, second one is member. But earlier, without this particular generic concept, now what happens basically, we are not going to store more than one object because at the compilation time we'll get an error. If you try to modify any changes, now compiler will give an error. But using this generic concept, now we are going to resolve this type of issues here. Now, how we are going to resolve this type of issues here? Now we'll understand here using this particular generic concept here. Now, after this particular collection framework is modified. The entire collection framework is also modified with the help of this particular generic concept. Earlier, it does not contain this particular proper behavior. Now, so it's modify the all the information once the generics are introduced here. So we'll see what exactly this particular generics will do. What exactly this particular generics will do. Now generics means basically it is a parameterized types here. Whatever we are calling generics here, it is something like a parameterized type. Now parameterized is nothing but these are the important here. Now method related parameter, constructor related parameter. Okay, so we discuss about these are the different type of parameter. Now here basically we are going to come with a different type of parameter type here, different type of parameters here. So now we'll see how it is going to be used. But this type of parameters, now we are going to create class level, interface level, as well as method level. This type of the generic parameter concept, now we are going to create a class level, method level, as well as interface level. Now, if we observe the simple example I'm trying to create here, so that we'll understand how this particular generic concepts are going to be used here. Now here I'm trying to create a one more package so that we can clear on like based on the concept. Now we are going to create a each and every package so that we'll understand what are the classes we discuss under the which concept here. Okay, now here you can see this is the package I created. Now after this particular package, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to create a class here. So what is the class name I'm trying to create? Something like a gen. So it is something like a generic here. Okay. So after this here, if you see, I suggested generic is nothing but parameters type here. But how we are going to provide the class level parameter type? Now this is the concept here. Now here I'm trying to declare as a T here. So what is the T is referring? Type here. T is referring now type. So what type of object we are going to provide? What type of object we are going to provide to this particular generic object here? Okay, so this is what we need to understand. Now here I'm trying to declare this particular object. Here I'm trying to declare this particular object. So after this here, now what I am doing here, this is the constructor. This is the constructor. Now using this particular constructor, what I'm doing here, I'm trying to I'm trying to come up with a object initialization. Okay, so this is okay. Here I come up with a obj. Now here you can see what I'm doing here. So basically now I created one constructor. The constructor internally it is expecting the type also. But in place of this particular type earlier, what we are going to provide basically, like if I want to pass the integer, if I want to pass integer generic, now it is expecting integer O. Now same generic constructor, now it is going to expect as a double O. Now if it is expecting another this particular primitive type, now what we will do, person p, person p. Now you can see constructor name is same, but based on our requirement we are going to provide the data type. Here I'm providing the integer. Now here I'm trying to provide in the like a double data type here. Now here I'm trying to providing the person data type. Now what you need to understand basically here, now here in place of this particular integer, now what we are doing here, we come up with a type here. The T, wherever we define the class level, we come up with a one parameter, something like a T. The same type now I'm trying to use for this particular two additional cases here. We are trying to use for this particular two additional cases. The first one is T, second one is something like a generic and T comma 0. So this is what we need to understand here. Okay, this is what we need to understand here. Now observe carefully. Once I created this type of constructor, okay, once I created this type of constructor, now what we are going to do, now I'm trying to return this particular object type. Also I'm trying to make T get obj, something like a get object here. Now return here, we can come up with the object here. Return, we can come up with this particular object. Now if you see, this is the one type of generic class we created, and here we are having constructor, and here we are having method, but the method is trying to return T. Now constructor is expecting T. So this is the type of object we declare here. Okay, so this is what we need to understand, declaring this particular object. After this, what we can identify basically, show type here. What we can identify basically, show type. Now, how this particular show type is going to provide here? Now, here I want to provide the type of the current object. I want to provide the type of this particular current object. Now, how this type of object, like a current type, is going to return? For this, I'm trying to print this particular println type of this particular t is. Okay. Now, obj dot get class dot get name. Now, this is we already identified. Basically, the current class, what is the type of this particular current class? It is going to print this. Getting it? This is what we need to understand here. This is what we need to understand here. Now, okay. Now observe carefully. Show type. I am trying to create a one method. Basically, this method what is doing it? What is the current to type of this particular t? Now it is trying to print here. Obj dot get class dot get name. Obj dot get class dot get name. So this is what we need to understand. Now this is the simple example on this particular t. Now I want to create a object of this particular t. Like I want to create object of this particular generic type here. Now, if we observe carefully, so far we declare this particular object, it is having the two methods and one constructor and one object we declare here. Now I'm trying to come up with a main method. So now after creating this particular main method, now what I'm doing here, I am going to create a object here. Now I'm going to create a object. So how I'm going to create a object here? Now you can see this is the generic type. Now in place of this particular t, now you cannot provide the t here also. Okay, here you cannot provide the t here. So why we cannot provide this particular t? Because while creating an object, in place of t, we need to provide the proper data type here. What type of data type we are going to use? So that is what we need to provide here. For example, now here I'm trying to providing integer. Now if I'm going to providing integer, now what we can identify basically, here you need to understand the constructor. Now here I come up with the generic class which is expecting integer related stuff, and here I'm trying to providing the constructor. So this is what the particular constructor. Now this constructor is expecting one parameter, but the parameter type also, it is a t. Whenever this particular parameter constructor parameter type is t, now it will consider this one, because in place of t, what we are doing here, we come up with a integer. Now whenever we are trying to providing the in place of t as an integer, the constructor value also we need to provide integer. The constructor value we need to provide integer. For example, in place of this particular integer, now I'm going to providing character. Now I'm trying to providing character. Now here you can see what is the error it's saying here. So required type generic integer, but what we provided here, generic constructor. Generic character we provided, but what is expecting? Generic integer. Okay, generic integer is expecting. Now here is saying, so it is whatever the data type we are using, both are mismatching here. Because here the type we given as an integer. The type we given as an integer. Now here we come up with this particular character related. Because of this, now we are getting an error. Now here observe carefully. Now I'm trying to provide as a 45. What exactly this particular 45 saying now? It is an integer. Okay, it is an integer type. Now this is also matching this particular type here. Now after this constructor we are calling, now generic dot get obj, generic dot get obj. Now what exactly this obj method will do? Whatever the 45 value we provided, now this is the 45 value it will return. Now if you observe carefully here, the wrapper type we provided. Integer basically it is a wrapper class. Now int is a primitive type. So if you observe carefully here, the data type I come up with the integer, but whenever I'm calling this particular get obj, so this is the method I'm trying to call get obj, and internally it is trying to return the t. So what is the t now? What is the t now? The t now it is replaced with the integer. Get the point? Now the particular t, it is going to be replaced with the integer. Now in place of t, if I'm going to come up with the integer, but what I'm trying to use, int I'm using. But how integer to int it is going to be happen basically? It is a automatic conversion. Okay, so final method basically it is look like this: integer, and here we are having get obj. Okay, so this is a method. Now it is trying to return as a what is the value, something like obj. So obj basically what we are doing here we are trying to declare this particular obj. Now whenever we declare, how we are initializing the value, using the constructor. So using this particular value, like line number 6, whatever the constructor we are calling, now this constructor is going to initialize. Now if once it is initializing, obj will contain what is the value, 45. 45 it's contain. How the 45 now it is storing it here, because of this particular constructor calling. Now we are storing this particular 45 value. Getting the point? This is what we need to understand. Now, because of this particular integer, this method now is trying to return as an integer. Now, even though this method is trying to return as an integer, now what we are doing internally, whenever we are calling this get obj, from the integer to int, I am trying to convert. From integer to int, I am trying to convert here. So this is what we need to understand here. So integer to int and int to integer, automatically it is going to convert, because these are the automatic conversion, vapor class to primitive type to vapor class here. Okay, now finally what you need to understand, now I'm going to print this particular value. I'm going to print this particular value. After this, now I'm going to call another method called ShowType here. Okay, another method called ShowType. Now here you can see, what you need to understand basically. 45 we are getting. Okay, 45 we are getting here. Now after this, now what we are doing here, type of t. Whatever the type of t we provided, something like java.lang.integer. Okay, so here we come up with this particular t. Now this t, now we replaced with the integer. Now what you understand here? So using the generic class, now we come up with the one type here. Now in place of this particular type, I come up with the integer. So this is the first part. Now what about the second part? Now if you see, after this particular section of code, now here I'm trying to come up with a boolean. Okay, now I'm trying to come up with this particular boolean. Now generic one I'm trying to providing, and here, so what we can do, false I'm trying to providing. Now observe carefully. Here also I'm trying to print here. Now generic one. Now if you observe carefully, this is the generic class. Now here also we are trying to create a generic class object. Now here also we are trying to create a generic class. But observe carefully, if this particular generic class, okay, if this particular generic class, now it is playing the two important role. First to place, now it is playing as an integer role, but second time, now it is playing as a boolean role. Second time, now it's playing as a boolean role here. This is what we need to understand here. This is what we need to understand. This is the main advantage we are going to get. Object type we created only one, but getting the point, object type, whatever the generic type we created only one. So here two different type of objects we are trying to create. These are the two different type of object we are trying to create. Now if I'm going to run this example, the object type, like show object type, both are different here. First one it is returning integer, second one is trying to return as a boolean. Okay, this is what we need to understand here. Now if I'm going to change it, basically this is not the integer, it is expecting boolean. It is expecting the boolean type. Now I'm going to run the same example one more time. Now observe carefully. First value is 45, and the data type we are having integer. Okay. Now second one is false. Get the point? Second one is false, and the type is boolean. And the type is boolean. So this is what we need to understand here. Okay, this is what we need to understand. Now carefully observe. Now what you are going to understand here, what you are going to understand basically here, even though the object type is same, but using the type of parameter, now we come up with two different type of parameter. The first one it is integer, second one it is boolean. Now if you want to create a one more type, you want to create a one more type like now 63.12. Now here generic 2 and value 2 I'm trying to providing, and return type basically it will become double, and here value 2. Now this generic 2 also we need to change it. Now you can see, so single object, now it is playing with multiple roles here, like with multiple different object. Now we are creating an object, now we are trying to perform the different type of operations here. So here you can see integer, boolean, double. Okay, same object we created with a different type. But if we observe carefully, now this is a one more object I created. Now you can see this is a generic type of object I created. Now here, what is the type we can provide here? Basically, the object creation, we can provide the generic type here. Now, for example, if I'm trying to providing into, for example, if I'm trying to providing with integer, now here something like into v, obj is equals to v. After this, now what I'm doing here? Now I'm trying to return get obj, return obj. Now here, what we will do? Here basically what we will do? Now here I'm trying to call the show type. Show type basically we need a object type. Basically we need a object type. Now here in place of this particular int, I'm going to provide integer. Okay. Now here you can see, now I'm trying to create a main method. Generic object I'm trying to create here. Generic. Now here, for example, if I'm going to create a string, it will not allow because it's expecting integer related stuff here. Okay. So something like a 45. Generics dot get object I'm trying to print here. So after this, now what is another important section basically? And here show type method. Now if you see generics dot show type. Now clearly observe here, this is saying 45 and integer. This is saying basically 45 and integer. Now this is the same object if I'm going to change with a additional value. For example, in place of this particular 45, now if I'm trying to store as a character, or we discuss about the like a boolean type. Now here I'm trying to store with false here. Okay, now I'm trying to come up with a false. Now this is we created a generic one. Now if you see, we are getting a compilation error. So why we are getting compilation error? Basically, the false it is not going to be allowed. Now here you can see what is expecting. Required type is integer. We provided as a boolean. But now if you go to this particular class, even though first time we come up with the 45, second time we come up with the false, third time we discuss about the double value. Now same object. Here you can see generic object only we are trying to create here. Now what you understand here, using this particular generic concept, get the point, using this particular generic concept here, now we are going to get more advantage compared to this particular non-generic. So this is basically it is a non-generic class. Now once our class is created, we are going to come up with the same type here. Okay, if I'm trying to create another type, basically it is throwing in a compilation error. Now using the generic concept here, we created the three objects. So this is what we need to understand. So this is the main advantage we are going to get from this particular generic concept here. Now, any questions? Any questions regarding this particular generic concept here? Okay. Now, if you don't have anything, now another important section, what you need to understand basically here, you need to understand the type here, whatever the type we are providing. For example, if I'm trying to providing int here, I'm trying to providing int. But if you see the line number 17, whatever the method we are calling get obj, the get object method, even though it is trying to returning as an integer, but explicitly we converted into. Okay, explicitly we converted into this particular intersection. But here, getting the point. But here, whenever we are trying to create object with help of this particular type here, getting the point. Whenever we are trying to create object with help of this particular type, now what happens internally? We cannot provide the primitive type here. We cannot provide the primitive type here. Getting the point. This is important here. So why we cannot provide the primitive type? So basically, the generic type of object we need to provide only object type only. Okay, we cannot come up with a primitive type. We can provide only object type here. So this is what we need to understand here. This is what we need to understand here. Here, primitive type, all the primitive type, it will not going to be work here. So in place of this particular integer, if I'm trying to providing double also will give an error. Now same boolean also, but this boolean is not giving an error, but this type of boolean now it is giving me an error. Now why it is giving me an error? Basically because here this is a primitive type here. Now here it is a vapor type. Vapor type is nothing but it is a object type here. Because of this, now we are not getting any error here, but above we are getting an error here. So this is the main differences between primitive type and object type. Now we cannot use the primitive type, only it will allow object type here. So this is also another important section here. Now how this particular generics are going to be improve the type safety, because here this is the type we are providing. These are the different type object we are trying to create here. So at this point, basically, now what we are doing it, now we come up with only one generic class. We come up with only one generic class now without providing like explicitly object type. Now what we are doing it, whatever the data type we are expecting, the specific data type we provided. Okay, whatever the data type we are expecting, the specific data type we provided. Now successfully the data type is converted into with a different data type here using this particular type here. Now successfully we converted. But here now another important section, basically if we observe here, all the object in the Java language, all the objects they are going to extend from the object class. By default, all the classes now they are going to be extended from this particular object class. Now object is a super class for all the subclasses, for all the classes here. But even if you're trying to create a customized classes or predefined classes, for all the classes, who is the boss of this particular class level? Object. Now without using this particular generic, now if you see this type here, we are trying to providing the type. Okay, so this is the type. Basically what exactly it will do, it will try to provide the whatever the data type we are going to use. Okay, in place of this particular t, now what I will do, I come up with the object here. Okay, I come up with the object. Now observe carefully, I am removing this is the same object. Now I'm trying to use it, the t here. In place of this particular t, I'm going to use object. Now, why I'm using the object? Because object is the superclass for all the classes. Now here you can see in place of this particular type, now again I'm trying to use the object. Okay. Now here this is the object. Wherever we are using the type, now same way now I'm trying to use this particular object here. Okay. Now we identified. Now if you see, so this will not allow here because the type we removed. Now I'm trying to create an object. So this is also they're not going to use. Now finally what we are doing is, now we are trying to create an object. For object creation, so here also, now for object creation we are not going to get any error. Now here you can see double level and boolean level as well as integer level, all the objects. So just identify the line number 16, line number 21, line number 26. So these are the lines we are trying to create an object. Okay. Now once we create an object, getting the point. Now once we create an object, basically now what we are doing it here, getting the point here. Now once we create object of this particular three location, now next step we are trying to call the get object. Next step basically we are trying to call the object. Now this object get object method, explicitly it is trying to return the object type. Now whenever it is trying to return the object type, now we are trying to converting into int, and here we are trying to converting into boolean, and here we are trying to converting into double. Now it is not converting automatically. Whatever the data type we are providing, automatically it is not converting. Why it is not converting? Basically, even though we are trying to use the superclass references here, explicitly we need to convert. Okay, automatically, like implicitly it is not going to be converted. Now explicitly we need to convert this particular object. Now here you can see, now what is the required type we provided? Integer. But whatever we are having this particular method, it's trying to return as a object type. The get obj method, now it is trying to return as an object, but here we are trying to providing as a integer. We are trying to providing as a integer. So this is what we need to understand here. This is what we need to understand. Now how this particular section of code is going to work. Now here you can see, now here I'm trying to cast into integer. Explicitly we are casting. Okay, this is what we need to understand. Explicitly we are casting here, and this also we are casting explicitly boolean, and for this also we need to cast explicitly double. Then only it is going to be implemented here. Now if I'm going to run this, if I'm going to run this particular example, what is saying basically? Okay, here, so this is the different class. Now I'm commented section. I will go for the same. Now I'm running. Now if you see here, integer, boolean and double. Integer, boolean and double. But how it is providing? Here we are providing primitive type. Here also we are providing primitive type, and this value we are going to provide a primitive type. Because of this particular primitive to wrapper, we have a automatic conversion. So automatically it is going to convert here. But what you need to understand basically, whenever we are trying to whenever we are trying to call the specific object related method, so any method, if it is trying to return the object, so in that case, we need to convert it explicitly. We need to convert it explicitly. So this is what we need to understand very carefully. But observe carefully, I'm going to create a 20 objects. I'm going to create a 20 object. For all the cases, now what we will do, we need to convert explicitly to the specific data type. Whatever the data type we are having for the specific data type, now we need to convert here. This is what we need to understand here. Okay. Now here, what is the main disadvantage we are going to get for this particular object type? Because of this particular object type, whenever we are trying to converting the specific data type here, we need to typecast it. Okay, so this is what the main drawbacks we are having. Because of this, now what we are doing here, we'll go for the generic type. So whenever we are using the generic type, this type of code no longer available. So this particular code we are not going to use anywhere. Explicitly, we are not using any casting related mechanism. Casting related mechanism. So this is what we need to understand here. Okay. Now, this is the differences between, even though if I'm trying to use the object as a like a declare object as a parameter, now we are going to use explicitly typecasting. Now, using the generic type, these are the explicit casting related mechanism we are not going to use here. Now, I will use a two parameter. Now, earlier we come up with only single parameter. Now, I'm trying to change with the generic type here. Okay. Now, I'm trying to change with the generic type. So, observe carefully. This is the generic type we created. Now, successfully, without changing any additional information, now successfully it is working here. So, successfully it is working here. Okay. Now, once it is working, basically what you need to understand here, I am going to discuss about the two parameter, how these particular two parameters are going to be implemented. What are the two parameters? First we come with only single. Now I will try to discuss about the two parameters. Now let me go to the one more class here. So this is the two generic concept we are going to use. Now first one is type, second one is val. Now in place of this particular type, you can go over the any value. Now I'm trying to use a. It is independent. Now that is not the important here. Now you can define whatever the character you are interested here. Okay. So after this, now what I'm doing, I'm trying to use this is the two parameter generic type example. So here you can see earlier we discussed only one parameter. Now I'm trying to come up with the two parameters. Now how these two parameters generic type example it's going to use. Now what we can do? Now we need to provide the object one, object two. Okay. Now constructor I'm calling. Now constructor is expecting two parameter because basically here what we are having two parameterize the generic type example we are discussing here. So now what you need to understand here, this is the two generics example. Now here object one, object two. Okay, obj1 is equals to object one is equals to o1, obj2 is equals to, here also we can discuss about the obj2. Now we can go for this particular this because now references we come up with the same here. Now constructor I created. Okay, after creating this particular constructor, now what you need to understand, this is the object we created, two type of object. Now constructor we created. Now I'm going to use a show type here. Okay. Now so that this particular show type will provide the what is the type of object we provided. What is the type of object we provided? Now first one is system.out.println type of this particular A. Okay, type of this particular A. Now what we need to understand basically here you need to understand here obj1 dot get class dot get name. Now same thing I'm going to create for this particular object 2 also, so that we can understand what is the first object we are providing and what is the second object we are trying to provide. Now this is the show type. Now after this what I'm doing is method I'm trying to return, so that we will get to know what is the value we are having. Return obj1 get obj2. So this is all about the important example. This is all about the important example. Now we created the two parameterized example. Here you can see earlier we discussed about the single parameter that is called type. Now we come up with a two parameter in place of this particular t. Now I come up with a. So so that we can go for the any character. So there is no restrictions here. Now we can use any character here. This is what we need to understand here. This is what we need to understand. Now after this, now what I will do here, I'm going to use the main method. Under this particular main method, now what we will do? Now what we will do? We need to create a object here. So what is an object I want to create here? Two generic object. Now inside this particular two generic object here, now what we can do basically here, we need to provide the two types here. Okay, here we need to provide the two types. What are the two types we can provide? The first one is A. A is nothing but first parameter, like the first type of parameter. Now in that case, I'm trying to use the integer. Anyone here, now I'm trying to use the integer. Second, the second parameter called V. Now I'm trying to use this particular string here. Now I'm trying to use string here. Now this is something like two generic object here. Now I'm trying to creating generic object. So carefully observe, it is expecting two parameter. Constructor is also expecting two parameter. Now whenever is expecting constructor as a two parameter, what are the two parameters types we need to provide? First one is integer, second one is string. For example, if you provide like this, okay, if you provide like this, now you will get an error basically. Now you'll get an error. Why you are getting an error basically? Because here the first type is the integer, but in the first type what we did, we come up with a string here. We come up with a string here. So the second type, it is a 45, but second type basically it is expecting as a string. Now we provide as a integer. So this is what we need to understand. The first one we need to come up with a integer. The second one we need to come up with a string here. Now if you do the like a position change, now it is not going to be work. Now here you can see what is the error is expecting a string comma integer we need to provide, but we provided as a string comma integer, but is expecting integer comma string. Okay, it is expecting integer comma string here, so the positions are changed. So this is also will get an a compilation error. Now remove this object 2. Okay, object 1 and object 2. So these are the important section now we identified here. After this, now what you need to understand here, so I'm trying to call this particular get object. Okay, get object. Now automatically it will try to return the object type here. Here you can see automatically it is trying to return the integer object here. Now same thing for object 2. Now this will also automatically it will try to return to the whatever the parameter type we provided. If you see, first parameter is integer, second parameter we provide as a string. Now here you can see this is the first parameter. In place of a, now what we provided? Integer we provided. The same integer now it is returning. Now in place of this particular v, what we provided? String. The same string is now returning. This is what we need to understand here. This is what we need to understand. Now object 1 and object 2. Object 1 and object 2. Now after this you can print this particular object 1 and object 2. Okay, object 1 and object 2. So this is the simple example we created. Now here we need to print the show type also. How we can print this particular show type here? To generic show type. Okay, now this to generic show type method what is doing it? Here you can see based on the object 1 and object 2, it is trying to return the what is the data type we provided. What is the data type we provided? Now it will return the same data type here. Now here you can see hmm, what we are missing, null pointer exception. Okay, somewhere line number 13, here we are getting a null pointer exception, obj2. Okay, here there is no obj. Here we are having only ob. Here we are having only ob here. Because of this, now we are getting a null pointer exception. Now I will run one more time. Now here you can see 45 and we given as a ABC. 45 is treating as a integer. The ABC now it will treat as a string. Now it is returning integer comma string. Now it is trying to return integer comma string. So if we want to create a one more object. Now one more object how we can create here. So for example, so same 2gen I'm trying to create, but you can see position I'm trying to change here. Okay, first parameter I'm trying to take as a string, second parameter I'm trying to take as a integer. Now here you can see the gen I'm trying to create here. After this is the two generic object. This is the two generic object. Now after this, what are the values we can provide? Okay, what are the values we can provide here? The values basically here we can provide the string we need to provide first. String we need to provide. Why we need to provide string? Basically, here the first object is 63. Like first object is a string parameter. Now here you can see first type of parameter we provide as a string. Now the second parameter we provide as a integer here. Okay, the second parameter now we provide as a integer here. So this is all about the simple example on this particular object 1 and object 2 here. How after this, what we will do? Now we'll call the gen dot get object 1. Okay, so after this I will print this one obj12 and gen dot obj2. Okay, so this is what we need to understand here, obj22. Now after this, now what we will do basically, now if we want to understand the what is the data type we are using, now I'm calling show type here. Now these two are the different object. Okay, if we observe the constructor, first one is expecting integer, second one is expecting string, and here the first one we provide as a string and the second one we provide as a integer. So this is the two different object we created. Now I'm trying to providing the value. Now if you see integer comma string and string comma integer. Okay, so using the two parameter, now we can provide the any number of data type here and any number of order. So first we come up with the integer and string. Order integer is first and string is second. For the second example, string position is 1 and integer position is 2. But if you come up with a different object, like we can go for the integer comma character, integer comma string, integer comma double, integer comma float, integer comma person also we can create. The customized object type, like we can go for the tomorrow session here. This is what we discuss in the simple example on this particular generic related concept. The first one is with a single parameter, and this is the two parameter example we discuss here. Now, any questions? Okay. Now, if you don't have anything, so I'm stopping the session. So tomorrow we are going to discuss continuation of this particular generic concept here. Now we are having bounded type here. The particular bounded type parameters we are going to discuss in the tomorrow session here. So this is all about the generic related example. We'll continue tomorrow the bounded type related example.